Daniel Julien, the CEO of Teleperformance Group, joins me now. Daniel, it's been quite a strong run for your stock, promoted to the CAC 40 earlier this year. To what extent has the pandemic hindered the run that your company has seen?
It has been a very interesting first half because we are starting pretty strong January, February, then suddenly we saw a kind of D shape in March and April, recovering in May and having a very strong June. So, in fact, we had to adjust very, very quickly our organization, but all in all, we were still able to grow 5% like for like in the first half, which is pretty strong if you consider the environment.
In terms of your margins, it looks like you reported a margin of 9.5% in the first half, and you're looking at a margin of at least 12.5% for the full year. That puts a lot of strain on the second half. How do you see that progressing?
That's pretty normal because typically our second half is way stronger than the first half, because during the second half you have all the peak of the consummation, of the sales, of the release of the new technology product, of the end of the year period. So for us to have 300 points more in results during the second half is not unusual. And definitely we are not going to have during the second half the valley that we got in April and May. And when I say that, it's even if there is a second wave of pandemic, because we have converted our operation into a vast majority of work at home. In fact, we have more than 70% of our people who are working at home today, 220,000 people.
It's huge numbers of people having to adjust essentially overnight. Looking at the year ahead, I take note of the fact that you said business growth accelerated in June, pointing to robust prospects for the second half. Does that apply to all of your regions? I know the U.S. is your biggest market.
Yeah, I would say June has been absolutely excellent. In fact, it was like a pre-COVID shape. And it applies to almost all our activities and all the regions except one of our business, which is still very, very depressed, very flat, which is TLS, which is our subsidiaries that process visa for the government. As travel bans are still here, they are very demand of visa, and this is the only business that is low.
And in terms of the robust outlook, how dependent is that on further support from governments around the world? Because a lot of the concern now when we look at government support is what happens when a lot of these job support schemes wind down and businesses look to resize their workforces.
Typically, if businesses look to resize their workforces, it have a positive impact on Teleperformance, because outsourcing is definitely a solution that is more efficient, less expensive, and more agile than in-house operation. So clearly, we are still going to see disruption during the second half, specifically in some sector like the transportation, like the travel, and accommodation, of course. But other businesses are booming. Typically, the teleservice, I mean the e-commerce, the entertainment, and all in all, we have a pretty strong vision for our second half.
And I see in your release that over 80% of your workforce was moved to the cloud to comply with social distancing rules. What percentage of your workforce do you think will remain at home on a longer-term basis?
On a longer term, I don't know. Once we are going to have a vaccine against the COVID, of course, some of our clients, for different reasons, will want our people to go back to the centers and to the operation because there is a proximity and it's theoretically easier to manage. I'm still not so sure because finally we get the same results with people working at home from the results we get from people working in centers. To me, it's going to dramatically change the paradigm of the people, and I would not be surprised if in 2 or 3 years from now we would keep a 50-50, 50% in centers and 50% work at home.
And
Which is pretty positive. It is positive because, for our employees, they save 2 hours, 3 hours in transportation. For the planet, you have less pollution. And at the end of the day, today, we have the technology to make sure that people work the way they have to work, and that the data is secure.
And what does that mean from a cost perspective moving forward for a business like yours if you're looking at half the workforce staying at home in the future?
It's still difficult to say because there are plus and minus. First, the employees that work in our centers, due to social distancing, we need much more space to accommodate them. Second, the employees who are working at home, we are going to see on the long term to have a kind of resilience that we are going to have to subvention some, first, their equipment at home. Second, how do we serve them at home? There is going to be more demand for support.